public's done with this Conservative Party. I think it's pretty clear that Rishi Sunak is not delivering even on the own promises he made, never mind anything else. I think people are done. And I think the job of the Labour Party now, and we've been doing this over the last few months in particular, but we have to ramp this up now between now and the next general election. I think we've persuaded people that the Tories deserve to lose. I think in Scotland, we're persuading people that the SNP deserve to lose. Our job now between today and the next general election is to spend every single day persuading people why Labour deserves to win and what change would mean for them, not just in terms of the door at Downing Street, but what change means for their life. That's why the New Deal for working people is so important, and what it means for workers' rights, pay and conditions. It's why reform of our public finances is so important, so people can have stability and confidence to business, that they can invest here. That's why the Green Prosperity Plan is so important, so we can unleash the potential of our renewable industry and bring down bills. But we've still got work to do to persuade people that it's a positive change and a positive reason to vote Labour, not just a negative against a failing government.
Local elections in England have dominated the weekend, but the fraught time for Scottish politics hasn't gone away. The SNP managed to survive a confidence vote this week, but with a new leader on the way, the party will still have a lot to do to steady the ship and keep voters on side.
John Swinney looks set to take up the post of First Minister, but what has the nationalist drama done for their electoral hopes, and how are other parties looking to capitalise? Polling suggests a Labour comeback in Scotland at the next general election. The Labour Scottish leader Anas Sarwar joins us now. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to speak to you, Adam and Kate.
Just want to ask you, first of all, you're closer to the action than we are. Do you think there is going to be a contest for the leadership of the SNP?
Well, that certainly seems to be the suggestion that's coming this morning from a gentleman, I think his name is Graham McCormick, who was out getting signatures at a pro-independence rally yesterday. So I think all of it just adds, I think, to the internal SNP psychodrama at a time where you have a complete focus from the government about how they manage their political party rather than actually how they take on the challenges facing the country and actually run an effective, competent government. So it looks like there may be a challenge, but we'll find out tomorrow, I suppose.
Do you think that a Swinney-led SNP would be closer, there'd be a greater overlap in the Venn diagram with Scottish Labour?
I think, to be honest, I think John Swinney is more, I give him, he's not Liz Truss, but I think he's more Rishi Sunak. And what I mean by that is, I think there may be an air of stability and competence. That's what people said would happen with Rishi Sunak. But I think the fundamentals remain the same. I think under the bonnet, I think it's still a deeply divided and chaotic political party. I think they've lost that communication that they were really, really effective at, actually, in fairness to them, for a long period of time. I think they've lost that connection with the Scottish people. I think the record is now coming into much, much sharper focus in terms of the last 17 years. And I don't think he represents a credible form of either stability or indeed of change. And I think that fundamental issue is still, I think, what's going to drag the SNP down come, I hope, the next two elections.
How much of an influence do you think the Cass report into gender ID for young people, the fact that she criticised the direction which Scotland has been going, how much of a responsibility do you think that is for the fall of Hamza Yousaf?
I think it forms part of a wider narrative. Whether it was the actual deciding factor, I don't think it was, but I think it formed part of the wider narrative where it felt as if you had a political party, two political parties at that time in government, that were talking about issues that are of significant importance to a small, small number of people, rather than talking about the big issues facing the country. The example I give of that is, look, we've got almost 1 in 6 Scots on an NHS waiting list, but the government don't seem to be talking about that anywhere near enough, but they were talking about, obviously, culture issues and gender issues. So I think that created an alienation with the public. I think also it created some internal dynamic and division, but I think it was just the latest in a series of issues where it looked like it was a party that just lost touch with reality, the everyday issues of people, and that internal dynamic getting more and more chaotic. So I don't think it was the ultimate deciding factor in terms of Hamza Yousaf breaking that deal with the Greens and then stepping down, but it did have an influence, probably.
But it did seem that there was a broad consensus at Holyrood, including Scottish Labour, for that kind of progressive agenda. Are you now rethinking?
I think it's, again, really important to stress what progressive agenda means to those people that are genuine progressives that want to see left of centre politics and mainstream politics, as opposed to going down issues which are actually fundamentally about pulling communities apart and pitting community against community. So I think also with the cash review, I mean, we've said that we believe that the cash review recommendations should be implemented in full. I'm someone that believes that we should be removing some of the indignities and humanities of the process of obtaining a gender recognition certificate. But at the same time, we have to recognise there are genuine concerns around the protection of single-sex spaces based on biological sex.
But
And
on that very simple
because
question,
they are hard rights that women rightly want to see protected and advanced.
so I mean, on that very simple question, can a woman have a penis?
It's very simple. A man has a penis and a woman has a vagina. And I think the idea that we get into that level of politics, I think, is a part of the reason why I think people move so distant away from politics. I think if you're having a separate conversation around the process in which someone obtains a gender recognition certificate, that's a very different argument. But biological sex is important. There are hard fought rights for women that must be protected. We have to protect single sex spaces based on biological sex. But I think there's also a separate conversation around how someone obtains a GRC and how you make that process as humane as possible.
I want to turn to something slightly different, which is Scotland's role, I suppose, in helping the Labour Party in Westminster. We had Pat McFadden on earlier, and he suggested that Scotland was going to be a huge part of Labour's success or failure in the next general election. How do you feel about that? I mean, how is Labour standing up right now in Scotland? I know previously you've suggested, I think, 20, 25 seats could be winnable. Is that still what you think, expectation-wise, or could Labour do even better than that?
Well, Pat McFadden's right. There is no route to a UK Labour majority government that doesn't go through Scotland. Scotland doesn't get a free pass in hoping somebody else does the job for us in terms of getting rid of this rotten Tory government. We've got to play our full part. And look, where we were 3 years ago compared to where we are now is night and day. 3 years ago, we were 32 points behind the SNP. We are now in the poll published in the Sunday Times this morning, 5 points ahead of the SNP, which shows us making significant gains. And look, I've never put a set figure on how many seats we want to gain in Scotland. I've always been a firm believer that the more people you persuade to vote for you, the more seats you're likely to win. So I think we're certainly competitive in around 25 to 30 seats. Whether we're in a position to win those seats, I think there's still work to do, and we've got to keep our feet on the ground. We've got to earn people's trust and support. But as I say, I want Scotland to lead the way in delivering that Labour government rather than pretending we can just be spectators.
And what do you make of the mood as expressed in England over the weekend in the results coming in from the local elections?
Look, I think it shows clearly that the public's done with this Conservative Party. I think it's pretty clear that Rishi Sunak is not delivering even on the own promises he made, never mind anything else. I think people are done. And I think the job of the Labour Party now, and we've been doing this over the last few months in particular, but we have to ramp this up now between now and the next general election. I think we've persuaded people that the Tories deserve to lose. I think in Scotland, we're persuading people that the SNP deserve to lose. Our job now between today and the next general election is to spend every single day persuading people why Labour deserves to win and what change would mean for them, not just in terms of the door at Downing Street, but what change means for their life. That's why the New Deal for Working People is so important, and what it means for workers' rights, pay and conditions. It's why reform of our public finances is so important, so people can have stability and confidence to business, that they can invest here. That's why the Green Prosperity Plan is so important, so we can unleash the potential of our renewable industry and bring down bills. But we've still got work to do to persuade people that it's a positive change and a positive reason to vote Labour, not just a negative against a failing government.
And have you had a frank conversation with Keir Starmer about the scale of the challenge that Labour will face? Because in the country as a whole, there's a huge amount of investment needed in local councils, in the NHS. And I think Labour are being quite clear that they are not going to be able to do everything all at once, and that, you know, people need to manage expectations. But obviously in Scotland, things are even worse. Particularly, you mentioned the NHS at the start of this interview. Have you had reassurances from Keir Starmer that he understands that and that he will almost put more money into Scotland than perhaps he will into the rest of the country?
Look, of course, Keir and I have really frank and robust conversations, but he doesn't need to be persuaded in the sense that he is acutely aware of the huge challenge facing our country. He recognises the scale of the challenge for any incoming Labour government. And actually, full credit to him that the easy thing to do right now would be just throwing out all sorts of promises and thinking, right, let's just maximise, pleasing everybody. When in actual fact, he's taking a sensible, stable approach to say, I realise when politicians make promises they can't keep, how that breaks trust in politics. I realise when politicians make promises that aren't backed up with how they're going to be funded, it risks your finances and it risks the economy. I'm not going to
But
do
does
that.
he? But does
So
he
he
recognise
totally
that
gets, he
there's a
recognises.
special case in Scotland? That's my point, really.
I think he recognises that we have to give competent government that gives people in Scotland confidence that you have a UK government that's working for every part of the UK. But look, in terms of fixing the NHS, of course, we want more investment to come in a UK NHS and a Scottish NHS, and that, of course, is partly around the relationship with a UK government. But the problem of fixing the NHS is going to be our problem. The NHS is fully devolved in Scotland. We set its budget, we decide its priorities, we are responsible for its operation. And that's why it's a perfect example of, yes, we need change across the UK so we can fix the economic mess, we can loosen up the purse strings, but we've also got need change here in Scotland so we can actually have a competent government that's reforming and renewing the NHS in Scotland.
Anas Sarwar, thank you for being with us on the show
My
today.
pleasure. Thank you.